Welcome to the Rare History Channel. 8 Terrible Dictators with a Secret Soft Side. In this captivating video, we delve into the intriguing world of 8 brutal dictators of the 20th century and uncover their secret soft side that few people are aware of. Prepare to be surprised as we unveil the secret soft side of these brutal dictators, offering a unique perspective on their multifaceted personalities and the intricate interplay between good and evil within each individual. Number 1. Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro is the famous former dictator of Cuba and was known for the brutality by which he ruled the country. While some of the reports of his brutality are exaggerated by nations like the USA, he was hardly a kind man in his methods. Starting with good intentions to help Cuba and remove a corrupt regime, he went out of control and had many murdered without trial. He then went about creating his own regime that strictly punished any dissent, and ended up much like the monster he had originally sought to destroy. This is unfortunately a common human problem. He who fights with monsters might take care lest he thereby become a monster. But while Castro may have gone too far, he enthusiastically believed in fighting imperialism and discrimination in general. In later life he regretted the way he handled things, especially in the early days of his revolution. He had never intended to rule with guns, and had believed that warfare was a means, not an end in itself. Unfortunately, he lost sight of his more noble beliefs once he took power. Number 2. Adolf Hitler. Unlike some of the others in this list, Hitler doesn't really need an introduction. He is considered to be the most evil man in modern history, and no one can really come close. But Hitler was said to show true kindness toward his female staff, and of course had a lasting partnership with his wife Eva Braun. The two even committed suicide together. Hitler was also known for having attempted to get into art school and being rejected. It can only be imagined what a different place the world would have been if he had been accepted, or had not given up on his dream to be an artist. Number 3. Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was the founder of the People's Republic of China, and a revolutionary figure who was directly responsible for much of what China is today. In many ways the country would not be in as good a state as it is today without him, but the method by which he accomplished order in China was extremely brutal. During his reign he would not allow any disagreement whatsoever, and was said to have executed hundreds of thousands of people. He believed that imperialism needed to be fought, and fight it he did, but with great bloodshed. But Mao, through his entire life, loved to write poetry, and is even said to have been a romantic poet. His poems may not be the best examples of Chinese poetry, but they are still considered to be excellent works. Here's an excerpt from one of Mao's poems called Yellow Crane Tower. The yellow crane has long since gone away. All that here remains is Yellow Crane Tower. The yellow crane once gone does not return. White clouds drift slowly for 1,000 years. Number 4. Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi was in the news quite recently when the Libyans revolted against his tyrannical rule. He was so despised that when finally captured, it is believed that the rebels killed him right there in the street even though he was begging for mercy. Gaddafi was a tyrant who ruled his country with an iron fist for decades, and was far from liked by most of his people. To his family, however, he was an incredibly kind and devoted patriarch. Gaddafi was beloved by his wife, his 8 biological children and his 2 adopted children. This far from mitigates the brutality of his reign, rather it highlights more clearly that he should have known better than to rule Libya the way he did. Those who have a loving home life should have a better understanding of what their brutality does to ruin other loving homes. Number 5. Augusto Pinochet. Augusto Pinochet was the dictator of Chile for almost 2 decades, and during that time he murdered and tortured thousands. But as a child, he was said to have been a very sensitive boy, afraid of water and scared by moving pictures in the theater. His own descriptions of his early life included a lot of sentimentality, and he remembered it all very strongly. It is hard to say what caused him to become the way he did, but it is important to note that evil men do not always come about because of a poor upbringing. Some of them make the choice later in life. Number 6. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein is known for the brutal, decades-long hold that he maintained over Iraq. He turned the entire nation into a police state, and brutally punished anyone who joked about him or questioned his rule. When he was at his worst, he enacted bloody purges upon his own Ba'ath Party and packed his jails with political prisoners. He once gassed an entire city that he suspected of being disloyal, killing what many approximate to have been around 5,000 people, and possibly injuring as many as 10,000 more. He was so arrogant about his rule that even after his capture, he still said that he should be referred to as the president. And Hussein, as you will have already guessed, also had a soft side. A military prison nurse tasked with keeping him alive reported that the tyrant would save bread crusts from his meals to feed to the birds, and would water plants nearby that needed attention. Number 7. Joseph Stalin. Most of us know of Stalin as the brutal tyrant that ruled Russia during World War II and beyond. His policies led to the deaths of millions of his own people. Interestingly, while he was responsible for arguably as many deaths as Hitler, history does not seem to judge him nearly as harshly. Perhaps it is because history tends to be written by the victors, among whom was Stalin, and his support had certainly been necessary for the eventual defeat of Hitler. Interestingly, he originally had quite a poetic soul. When he was young, he wrote romantic poetry. A poem of his begins with, "The pinkish bud has opened, rushing to the pale blue violet, and, stirred by a light breeze, the lily of the valley has bent over the grass." Imagine what a different place the world would be if he and Hitler had persevered with their poetry and painting. Number 8. Francisco Franco. Francisco Franco was an incredibly brutal dictator of Spain. He was known for massive executions of his enemies in public, with music and dancing to accompany them. He would have his soldiers carry enemies' ears and noses on the ends of their rifles through the streets. Franco is believed to have killed hundreds of thousands of his own people and sometimes used brutal methods such as the garrote, a particularly gruesome form of strangulation. After his death, many paintings were discovered by Franco, very detailed and excellent works for an amateur. In a book by his grandson, he explains that his grandfather was an incredibly attentive and loving man and that he had a softer side. He would paint for long hours to relieve stress. Perhaps in contrast to Hitler, if Franco had attempted to enter art school instead of joining the military like most of his family, he would have succeeded and the brutal dictator would never have been.